Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for joining me. And today we're going to be doing our mid-season picks and predictions video. I'm going to be telling you what I think each AFC team is going to be finishing the season with, record-wise, standing-wise, who's going to make the playoffs, who's not, who's getting the bye week, who's winning the division, all of that. I'm going to be doing the NFC video next, probably either tomorrow, if not Saturday. Today is Thursday. The Bengals-Ravens game is on later today. That's going to be affecting some of my standings after this, so let's get straight into it. We're going to be talking about the AFC North, starting with the Cleveland Browns, and their current record is 2-7 with the remaining schedule of Saints, Steelers, Broncos, Steelers, Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens, and with all that the Browns showed up for 1 week and 1 week only, and that was an upset against the Ravens. I don't see them getting another upset against the Ravens anytime soon. I can totally see them beating the Bengals because Burrow just can't beat the Browns sometimes, minus earlier this year. Chiefs, they're going to lose. They're probably going to get swept by the Steelers. But AFC North is weird. AFC North football is always very competitive no matter how one-sided the matchup should be. And we're going to get, that's why I wanted to choose this division to get it over with first, because they're the toughest one to pick for me. So I think, and also for every AFC team, I have a floor, ceiling, and what my picks are for their record. So for the Cleveland Browns, I have a floor of 3-14 with a ceiling of 6-11. I think at worst case, Cleveland only gets one more win against an AFC North team, probably against the Saints or Bengals or whoever. I think that's their record. I think their floor is their actual record. That's what I have them dealing with. 6-11. I think they can squeeze in a couple upsets here and there, but that's really all I got for the Browns. Anyways, next up, I've got the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Bengals are going to be looking back at those 3 losses. They have 3 losses out of the 5 that are going to be detrimental to their season of why they probably won't make the playoffs, and that's going to be the Week 1 Patriots loss that they have no excuse for losing. I don't care if it's Week 1. The one loss against the Chiefs where you got called for a 4th down pass interference, which was technically the correct call. As much as I root against the Chiefs, that was technically the correct call. And then the game you had no business losing against the Ravens, missing your own field goal, icing your own kicker, running 3 plays in a row in overtime, Burrow throwing 5 touchdowns and still losing. And looking at the rest of the schedule, it's really going to be tough. These next 3 games are going to determine their season. Joe Burrow himself says they have to win 7 of 9. They've won 1 in a row so far. So to him, they have to get a 10-win record. For him to make the playoffs, they have to win 10 games. And for those 10 games, minus the Raiders because they already played them, so they need 6 more wins. And of all these teams, I could see them beating the Ravens tonight, but I'm not doing that. I could see them beating the Chargers, beating the Titans, Cowboys, and Browns, and versus Broncos is very tough, and they're not sweeping the Steelers by any means. So that's why I've got their ceiling at a solid 11-6. I think they could totally turn the tables if their defense just gets their shit together. If they can utilize Chase Brown even more than they already have, because Zach Brown is going to be out for at least 4 weeks because he's got put on IR. The Bengals could turn this around. If Joe Burrow got those wins over the Chiefs and Ravens, he'd be talked about just as much as Lamar's MVP conversation. He's got 20 touchdowns. He's second in the league. He's only got 4 interceptions. He has 2 games with 5 touchdowns. And that's all. So your ceiling is 11-6 if everything goes right for you. If everything goes wrong for you, you lose to the Ravens. So then if you lose to the Ravens, you're probably going to be underdogs against the Chargers. You got to play the Steelers twice, who are not easy. Joe Burrow has a career losing record against the Browns. Playing the Broncos is not going to be easy. There's just can be so much wrong for the Bengals. But I got the finishing at 9-8. 9-8 to me is not good enough to make the playoffs. I think they're barely going to miss out. And whatever happens next in these upcoming games happens. But to me, their biggest loss is going to be those 3 that I mentioned earlier against the Chiefs, Ravens, and definitely against the Patriots. You win one of those games, or 2 of those games is what you should have won. Then you're making the playoffs with ease. But since that didn't happen, I can't do it. Then we're going to go into the Baltimore Ravens, who are looking like strong Super Bowl contenders. Lamar and Derrick Henry looking like they could be co-MVPs. I know it's a quarterback-heavy league, so Lamar's probably going to get back-to-back MVPs. But I love what I'm seeing from Derrick Henry. The problem I have with the Ravens is their secondary. What they haven't been able to do is stop the pass. I mean, I know they demolished the Broncos, but aside from that, it seems like anybody can pass on these guys. And that's what I'm looking at with these upcoming schedules. You got the Bengals tonight, who can throw their ass off. You got the Steelers, who look really good under Russell Wilson. You got the Chargers, who in which Justin Herbert looks like he's getting his groove on. He's finding his momentum. He's finding his rhythm with his receivers, and the Chargers defense is still very tough. You've got the Eagles. They're looking like heavy favorites, even with Nick Sirianni's incompetence. As much as everybody is shitting on Nick Sirianni, the Eagles are still Super Bowl contenders regardless. Giants, you should beat. Steelers, you're not gonna sweep, but I don't think the Steelers will sweep you. I think that's a clean split. At Texans will be a very interesting game, and against the Browns, you should finish strong against. So I think the Ravens are for real. I don't see them slowing down at any point. I love the acquisition of Deontay Johnson. And so with that, I think I got their ceiling being 13-4, only losing one more game this week. That loss coming against most likely the Steelers or Eagles even. And with the floor of 11-6, which I think is still going to be good enough to win the division even at that point. I think 11-6 being like if you just split with the Steelers, you lose to the Eagles or the Texans or the Chargers, one of those games. I don't see you getting 3 more losses, but it could very well happen. AFC North football is very tough because it seems like everybody can beat everybody amongst that division, no matter how bad or good one team may be. Example, 2 weeks ago when the Browns upset the Ravens. But the Browns should have been starting should have been starting Jameis Winston from the start. Then we would be having a different topic about them. But that's neither here nor there. But I've got them finishing 13-4. I think they will finish with a ceiling of 13-4. I think they're going to finish with the one loss. I'm not sure who that's going to be against. Most likely, I would say either the Eagles or the Steelers. I want to say the Steelers really bad. I think that's the most likely one considering they still have 2 matchups left. If they lose to the Bengals tonight, that's going to be an interesting look on the rest of the schedule because that just kind of throws it out the window. But I think they should win fairly easily today. And Ravens are going to be either 2 or 3 seed. I don't see them getting the bye week, but they look phenomenal. Lamar's playing his ass off. He's got multiple perfect passer ratings. He's running and throwing. Derrick Henry is leading the league in yards and touchdowns. I mean, Jesus. Now just do that against the Chiefs and we can have something to talk about. And with that, that brings us to the Steelers. Steelers 6-2 coming off a bye week, coming off a nice win over the Jets, starting Russell Wilson. And this is a very brutal finale to the schedule. Like this, I don't think any team, AFC or NFC, has a more tough final 8 or 9 weeks than the Steelers. I mean, look at this. How many playoff teams are on this list? How many teams competing for a playoff spot or a Super Bowl spot are on this list? Already you've got the Commanders, who have got beating you in a close fashion. Should be a very interesting game. You've got the Ravens twice. You've got the Bengals, who are not easy, twice. You've got the Eagles. You've got the Chiefs, in which Mahomes is undefeated against the Steelers, and I think that win streak would continue here. He's 3-0. He'll be 4-0 after this year. You've got the Browns twice, who could upset you because AFC North football is just that bizarre. Jameis Winston could upset it. I'm not going to pick it to happen, but I could see it. I think at worst case, the Steelers would fall to 8-9. I think if all those games go wrong, you lose to the Ravens, maybe split with the Bengals, lose to the Browns, lose to the Eagles, lose to the Chiefs, then you're gonna go 8-9. But I don't see that happening. I got you guys going 10-7. 6-2 to 10-7 is not exactly ideal. That's about a 4-5 record from this point onward, but that's still respectable considering the amount of competition you have coming up. That's really going to be tough to getting a winning record against. And your ceiling of 13-4, I think if Russell is for real and that defense is great, I mean, they just acquired Mike Williams, who is a nice, solid red zone threat to, have as their slot receiver. And you still got George Pickens. And I like what I'm seeing from Najee Harris. And they got Jalen Warren back. And that defense is as great as ever. They're always great under Mike Tomlin. You're going to have a winning record. I mean, the floor is 8-9, but it's not likely considering Mike Tomlin has a hard on for getting winning records and losing to the first round every year. But we'll get to that when that time comes. But yeah, 10-7 is what I got. I don't got you winning the division. I think you barely make it out of this really brutal schedule. If you can win against like the Chiefs and Ravens and Eagles, like those 3 wins would buy it all. Even if you finish 9-8, if you win those 3 games, I'd be interested in what the Steelers can do in the playoffs. But now with the AFC North done, let's get into the AFC East, starting with the Miami Dolphins. 2-6. Tua has came back, and he is 0-2 because his defense wants to let up almost 30 points a game. He's got all these playmakers. The Rams game is going to be a very interesting Monday Night Football game. So with the Miami Dolphins, I think it's too late at this point to consider making the playoffs. Even if you won 8 of your next 9, 10-7 is going to be a tough one to do considering it's very unlikely. At Packers, at Rams, at Texans versus 49ers, the Jets twice. I mean, you're going to lose, I'd say, at least 3 of those games. I think you beat the Raiders. I think you beat the Patriots. You could definitely beat the Browns. You could probably split with the Jets, depending on how they look at that point. Packers is a very interesting one. I could see an upset right there. But I don't know. I think it's just too late for the Dolphins. At this point, the Dolphins should just care about Tua finishing the season healthy. No more concussions, no injury, no knee injury, no Achilles, no minor tear, no anything. He's still refusing to wear the head cap gear, and that's concerning. But yeah, the Dolphins, I don't really see an upside for them. I think I got the best case scenario is 7-10. I think they win 5 of their next 9, and that's a pretty accomplishing finish considering your start. You know, you go 5-4 these next 9 games, but your floor is also 5-12. I see you winning 3 games for sure. There's some winnable games in here. You've got the offense to do it. You've got the offense to go on a streak, but I don't think that streak's going to mean anything in the long run because it's not very likely. You still got some very tough competition. I think I have you finishing 6-11. At this point, all I really care about is that Tua finishes the season with no concussions, and I think that's what everybody's mindset should be, is just keep it up, Tua. I mean, their offense is averaging under Tua, what, 28 points a game? So I'm very curious how they're going to look against the Rams. I'm still like indecisive of that game. I picked the Rams to win that one. But even the other games, like how are the Jets going to fare against the Dolphins? Like if the Dolphins can run their ass off, you know? Yeah, Miami Dolphins 6-11, middle of the pack for the East. Next one up, we got the Patriots. Patriots is not really much to look forward to. I won't talk about them too much. The big thing for the Patriots is how is Drake May going to finish the second half of the season? I love what I saw from him as starting quarterback. I love that little final play he had where he bought like 20 seconds of time against the Tennessee Titans. Granted, they lost, but that wasn't his fault. I mean, the interception was, but like, he's not working with a lot. I just want to see Drake May develop this second half of the season. I want him to pull off a couple upsets. I'd love to see him like pull an upset against the Bills or the Cardinals or against the Dolphins. Rams will be an interesting game. At Bears is going to be tough. I think if you're a Patriots fan, your worst case scenario is you just lose out the rest of the season because you don't have the offensive roster to really compete with most of those teams. That's very unlikely though, but I do only have you finishing 3-14. Although I have you finishing 3-14, I'd love for you to have that ceiling of 5-12 because I want to see Drake May win a few games. I really like what I'm seeing from the dude. I want him to see it pull off a couple upsets. I want to see some more magic out of him, and I think I'm going to get that. But looking at the schedule, I just don't know who I can really pick the Patriots against at that point. Like there wasn't exactly many games where I'm like, yeah, Patriots should get that game. But even so, even with the 3-14 record, Patriots should just consider this a win for the fact that Drake May, if he looks to improve and get better and he's thrown like multiple touchdowns in the last couple games of the season, then you just focus your draft on getting him some outfield help. Next up, we've got the New York Jets, and for the Jets, this is either going to be a massive turnaround or a massive stinker. You know, it's weird to say that they're going to be turning this game around like they barely beat the Texans who were missing 2 star receivers. And they still let a running back gain 150 plus yards on 30 plus carries, 30 plus touches, I should say. You know, you still were scoreless in the first half. Granted, your rookie fumbled, which why are we still doing Deshaun Jackson shit? If you're going to throw the ball behind you, at least hold the ball forward. Like, hold it in front of you until you cross the plane and then throw it behind you. Like, how are receivers still doing that? I don't really know. But anyways, for the Jets, it's like their run defense is not that great. Sauce Gardner is not playing as great as he did like the previous couple of years. And Rodgers just doesn't look good. I mean, regardless of what he says or what the Jets think they can maybe do, if they do think that, Rodgers is just not playing very good football. You know, his line isn't holding up very well. He is getting sacked a few more times than you'd like. I love what I'm seeing from Garrett Wilson. Devontae Adams got it going in the final quarter against the Texans. But looking at the schedule, it's like the Cardinals are favored by 1. I think at best case scenario, you beat the Cardinals because that's a winnable game. You beat the Colts. I could see you beating the Seahawks considering I don't really believe in Geno Smith right now. I could see you splitting with the Dolphins, beating the Jaguars. I don't see you beating the Bills, and the Rams is a very interesting one. So I think at best, if you're the Jets, you're gonna finish 10-7, which might be enough to make the playoffs because I got a few teams making going at 10-7. That it'll come down to conference and head to head and divisional records. But I think at worst is that was just a fluke game against the Texans. It was just you were favored in that matchup anyway, and your 4 is 5-11. I think you're not that serious of a team. I think Rodgers is going down the shitter. His performance is going down the shitter. I still don't like the firing of Robert Saleh and Rodgers. As a person, I don't like Rodgers. As a quarterback, I don't like him at this point. Throw all the people under the bus as you want. You still freaking suck at this point. Like Garrett Wilson is making all these spectacular catches, not because of Rodgers, but because he's a good receiver. And that's why I've got them finishing 8-9. I really don't see who they can. I don't see where they can get their 9th or 10th win from. I think currently at 3 wins, they're gonna pull some interesting stuff out of their ass to go 8-9. But that's really it. I don't really know what else I can really say. I'm very stumped about where to put them. Because I could totally see it. Like, the Jets could go on a run and go back to the reason people were picking them as, like, playoff contenders, Super Bowl, like, not favorites, but contenders. And that could happen, but I just don't see it. Jets are going to go 8-9, and that's what I'm calling it. Bills, this is the team that's going to be competing for a number 1 or number 2 seed. Colts is a trap game. But then you've got you thought the Steelers' schedule was rough. This 4-game stretch is even rougher than anything the Steelers have to go through. Versus Chiefs, versus Niners, which are 2 home games. You go to LA for the Rams, and you go to Detroit. Those 4 games is where I'm conflicting. I think at worst case scenario, you lose all 4 of those games. Or you lose 3 of those games. Because I don't see you losing 4 in a row. You lose 3 of those games and maybe you lose one to either the Jets or Patriots or this Colts trap game. That could happen, but I'm not picking it. So I think at worst, the Bills will be 11-6, which would still win in the division very easily. Very easily for the Bills. Should still win the division. Should still be a top 3 seed at that point. Maybe 4th if you're unlucky. Your ceiling is 15-2. I could totally see you winning out. I love what I'm seeing from Josh Allen. He's thrown 2 picks now back-to-back weeks. 15-2 is still very doable. He's making all these playmakers go. James Cook is great. Amari Cooper is very underrated, and I love the addition of Amari Cooper. I've loved him since the Raiders drafted him back in 2015 as a rookie. I thought he was a very underappreciated as him in a Raiders outfit. Cowboys, he was always great. And now you've got Keon Coleman, who is hurt, but he should be back. Dalton Kincaid is still there. Khalil Shakir is great as always. And Josh Allen, if he continues this streak, like, I'm not saying he's going to be in the MVP conversation, but as a team, I love what I'm seeing for the Bills. Like, their defense is playing so good despite them missing so many players from the offseason, from before the season began. But I've got them finishing 14-3. I think they're going to lose one of those games in that 4-game stretch. Whether it's the Chiefs, the Niners, the Lions, or the Rams, it's going to be one of those games. I don't know which one. We have to see what they look like on a week-to-week basis. The most likely one would be Lions and Chiefs. And that's probably what I'm going to pick. I am picking them to beat the Chiefs, because if they don't beat the Chiefs, who the fuck will? But other than that, yeah, Bills are my 2nd seed. They're going to be the 2nd seed heading into the playoffs. Now we go into the AFC South. This one is not going to be as interesting considering what teams are left. But the Jaguars, 2-7. You've got about maybe 3 winnable games here. What can I really say about the Jaguars? They have looked like shit since the beginning of the season. Like, they almost pulled off against the Eagles, but that was more so because of the Saquon Barkley fumble 6 and Nick Sirianni not playing the clock right and all that. But that's more of a Nick Sirianni issue, which we'll get to in the next video. For the Jaguars, though, I mean, maybe you could split with the Titans. Maybe you can upset the Texans. I don't see you beating the Lions for sure. You're definitely not beating the Vikings. You could beat the Raiders, I guess. I think your ceiling for right now is 6-11. I guess those teams I mentioned, the Colts, the Vikings, the Raiders are winnable games. You can maybe upset the Texans. But I don't see that happening. I say your floor is just losing out and going for that number 1 draft pick. But I have your record being at 3-14. I'm sure you're probably going to get at least 2 wins. I don't really actually see you only getting 1 win. Because Trevor Lawrence is better than that, better than losing freaking 10 in a row, 12 in a row, whatever the streak is now. But I just don't know who to put like your W's against. So yeah, 3-14 for the Jaguars. Next up, I've got the Indianapolis Colts, and my God, dude, the Colts look so foolish right now. After all that talk, Anthony Richardson under 50% completion percentage, getting tired and staying on the sideline for a play and getting criticized for that, saying Joe Flacco is going to be your starter, and after all that, then Joe Flacco just comes out and lays a stinker against the Vikings. Man, what do I even say? It's like with Flacco, you're either going to get like a perfect passer rating or you're going to get a 0 touchdown 2 turnover game where you score 5 points or some crap like that. And like they're not utilizing Jonathan Taylor that much. Everybody was saying like, oh, the receivers are so much better. At least for fantasy purposes, they're so much better for Flacco. But even then, they didn't do shit last week except for Josh Downs. Well, I really like Josh Downs too. I think he's an underrated receiver. But looking at their schedule, the Colts got some favorable games. They could totally beat the Patriots. I could see them honestly beating the Jets, beating the Titans, beating the Giants, beating the Broncos. That 3-game stretch right there. So if you're coming into week 16, let's say you lose to the Bills. Let's say you lose to the Bills, Jets, and Lions. You're 4-8, but then you beat the Patriots. You're 5-8, and the Broncos will come back to. The other 3 games are winnable, so that's an 8-8 record beside the Broncos game. The Broncos game is very tough because last time those 2 teams played was probably the ugliest game I've ever seen in my life. So you're 8-8 heading into the Broncos. That's a 9-8 record if you win that game, which I think is what your actual ceiling is. I think best case is you go on that 4-game win streak or you win 3 of your next 5 in that final 5 games right there. But otherwise, I really don't see that happening. I think the Joe Flacco thing is going to come back to earth, and the Colts are going to have conflicting sides of whether to start Richardson for development or to start Flacco because you really think you have a shot at the playoffs, which I don't think you do unless you just prove me wrong and go on this massive winning streak. But that's why I'd be finishing 7-10. You're going to lose a couple games that you are up, and Flacco's going to throw a crucial interception and cost you a game. At least 2 times I see that happening. And if you start going back on your word and saying Richardson is starting again, then you're just going to look like fools and lose the games anyway. So yeah, Colts 7-10 to me. Tennessee Titans starting Will Levis the rest of the way. I don't really see any upside for the Titans. I mean, look at this schedule. Holy shit. Like, how many playoff teams are on this schedule? How many teams competing for a playoff spot will be on the schedule? You've got the Chargers, who you're heavily not favored against. The Vikings, great defense. Texans, contenders. Twice you got them. At Commanders, very tough game. Jaguars, beatable. Colts, beatable. Bengals. Honestly, I could see that being beatable, but not likely. I'd still pick the Bengals in that game. And yeah, I think your best case scenario if you're a Titans fan is just to see where Will Levis finishes at this season. I think your floor is 3-14. You're definitely going to win at least 1 game against the Jaguars or Colts. But I think your ceiling is 6-11. I think if he could pull off some upsets, whether it's against like the Chargers or the Bengals or whoever be, or the Texans, AFC South, it could happen. But I'm not kicking that. I think your floor is what your record is going to be at the end of the year, 3-14. It's less likely that. It's more likely probably going to be 4-13. But I just couldn't give you a second win anywhere because it was hard for me to pick upsets for the sake of being an upset. Looking at all these schedules when I was on playoffpredictors.com, it was hard to look like, man, I could totally see them like beating this team like in a random upset that nobody predicted. I couldn't really do that for most of these teams. So yeah, Tennessee Titans 3-14. And that brings us to the Houston Texans 6-3. Looking a little rough without Stephon Diggs is gone for the rest of the year. Hugo Collins is not practicing this week. He's more likely going to be back for the Cowboys game. So I've got you losing against the Lions. Lions are so good. Can't wait to talk about them in the next video. So let's say you lose to the Lions. You're 6-4. You beat the Cowboys. You're 7-4. Beat the Titans 8-4. Beat the Jags 9-4. You're 9-4 heading into week 15. And that's where I think you're actually going to be heading into week 15. I don't really see that outcome change because let's say you beat the Lions but then lose to the Cowboys in an upset, I could also see that happening. So 9-4, you got the Dolphins, Chiefs, Ravens, Titans. 3 teams are very tough to play. The final one is the Titans don't really have much to play for at that point. I think that's a guaranteed win. So I see you beating the Dolphins 10-4 and then losing to the Chiefs and Ravens at 10-6. And then maybe an upset happens with the Titans um at what's it called, in the final week of the season. Maybe you'll fall to 10-7. I don't know, because I could also see the Dolphins upsetting you. I could totally see the Dolphins. I could totally see the Texans going on a 3-game losing streak right there from 15, 16, and 17. That is a very losable schedule right there. Dolphins, like, even though they're 2-6, like, their offense is still great. They're not gonna just fall down against every team they play. They're gonna play their ass off. So I think that's why I have them finishing the season with 10-7. I just think the Dolphins, Ravens, Chiefs, and Lions, and maybe honestly I could see another upset happening against the Texans. Because as much as I love what I'm seeing from Joe Mixon, I love CJ Stroud. Nico Collins is a fantastic receiver with CJ Stroud. They have such good chemistry. Losing Diggs hurts. You know, Tank Dell is a solid receiver, but I think there's just some tough games. You're still going to win your division. You're still at the very least going to host a playoff game, and I can't wait to see that happen. Whoever you're going to play, whether it's the 5th or 6th seed. But I have your ceiling being at 12-5. Maybe you prove me wrong. Maybe you only lose 2 games the rest of the way, and you prove yourself. You proved yourself, you know, against the Bills. I did not see you kicking the Bills' ass the way you did. So you can easily prove me wrong right now. You could easily beat the Lions and the Ravens, or, you know, something like that. I could totally see that happening, because CJ Stroud I believe in. But I just couldn't pick it. Even though my final record is 10-7, I was leaning much towards 11-6. It's just I felt like a trap game for the Dolphins game, which is kind of what I was leaning toward, just at face value as of right now. We'll see what happens coming into that week, though. But yeah, Texans are going to win their division 10-7. And now we get into the AFC West, and we're going to start with the worst team in the division. My God, I did not think they were going to be this bad at this point. I mean, I had them finishing last before the season even began, but I did not think 2-7 bad. You know, what do they really have going for them? You got Jacoby Myers, who's a solid receiver. You got rid of Devontae Adams. Your head coach is a problem. Your starting quarterback is a problem. Your run game is not existing. Your running backs are not existent. Your run defense is not that great. So what am I supposed to say? Look at this schedule: Dolphins, Broncos, Chiefs, Bucks, Falcons. That's like 5 L's in a row right there. I could see you beating the Jaguars, and a Derek Carr revenge game for the Saints, assuming he's not concussing more of his players. Shout out Chris Olave. Glad he's out of the hospital. And then week 18 versus the Chargers, who will be fighting for a playoff spot. So 6 of your next 8 freaking teams are teams pushing for a playoff spot. And even then, the Dolphins is a reach, but they're not going to give up and die. They're going to freaking put some points on you. And so for the record, I think the worst case scenario for the Raiders is they just lose out. The one team I could see them being the Jaguars, and I could see the Jaguars also winning. Like that point, that's a tank bowl right there. There's nothing going for them. But I got them winning 3-14. I think they'll win either that game or the Saints game. We'll see how that goes. Your ceiling, maybe you pull off a few upsets. Maybe you beat the Dolphins. Maybe you beat the Chargers. Maybe you beat the Saints. I see those are the 3 most likely I see out of you. Maybe you upset the Chiefs like you did last year, like when nobody expects it, because you did put up a fairly good fight against them. It just wasn't enough. But no, I can't do it. I think the Raiders finish with a top 5 draft pick at 3-14. And now we get into the Broncos. Broncos are a very interesting team because their defense is super good. If you exclude the Ravens' ass beating from last week, the Broncos are super good. But they've got some tough games too. But I mean, let's say they lose to the Chiefs. I don't think anybody is picking the Broncos against the Chiefs just yet. My problem is week 18 versus the Chiefs, because at that point, if the Chiefs are, say, undefeated or have 1 or 2 losses but are in a position to where they've clinched the bye week, are they going to rest their starters and let the Broncos win? You know, that's where I'm sitting at. Because as of right now, I've got the Broncos beating the Falcons, Raiders, Browns, and Colts. I've got them going into the Chargers, Bengals, Chiefs streak at, 9-5? That's a really good record considering they have a rookie quarterback who... He needs to work on his overthrows. Granted, it only happens a few times a game, but you want to see that chime down a bit. But I love what I'm seeing from Cortland Sutton. I want to see them utilize their running backs a little bit more, and I love their defense. I really like Sean Payton's defense. I like Pat Surtain a lot, and I like Cortland Sutton a lot. I could totally see them going. I don't see them going into Kansas City and pulling off the upset. Not at this point. But yeah, that week 17, 16, and 18 games is going to be very telling. Because I do have them, worst case heading into week 16 is 8-6. Like maybe they lose to the Falcons or the Raiders, divisional matchup, or maybe the Colts Broncos is just as ugly as last time, but I really don't see that happening in Denver. They got 2 home games against the Browns and Colts. You should win those. Your second loss should either come from the Falcons, Raiders, or Chargers. One of those three first before week 17 and 18. Week 17, I'm very interested to see. I don't, because that's going to be telling. That's going to be determined who might get eliminated in that week, because at that point, the Bengals are going to be needing that win streak. And it's at Cincinnati. That's a very tough game to pick. So I think if you're the Broncos, my floor for you is 8-9. There's just some very tough games left. And 8-9 is still a solid record considering you had a rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, that what was like your ceiling at the beginning of the season? Maybe 6 or 7 wins. Like 8 and 9 wins is very, very respectable. But I don't see that. I see them actually getting 10-7. I think I have them making the playoffs as the 6th or 7th seed, and that 7th loss is really detrimental to that week 18 matchup because I think they're going to lose to the Chiefs, but I also think the Chiefs would start their starters and not just let the Broncos, you know. But if the Broncos are in a position to where they've clinched the 7 or 6 seed regardless of matchup, then I could see them just resting their starters and taking the L and just letting both teams' backups play. So I really don't know. That week 18 matchup is very hard to settle on. But I've got your ceiling at 11-6. I really believe in your defense. I think Bo Nix is going to be improving over the next couple games. After this Chiefs loss he takes, he's going to go on a nice win streak. And that's going to be what happens. Like that week 16 against the Chargers, it was where this Broncos season really is told. Is it going to end there, or are they going to have a playoff push? Yeah. So, Broncos, I'm very excited to see what you guys have coming up. And that leaves us to the Chargers. Chargers, number 1 ranked in the NFL right now in terms of points per game allowed, which is a stat I've not heard from the Chargers in a very long time. Harbaugh is very much for real. He has changed the culture of that team. Now, the Chargers, if they miss the playoffs, minus this schedule coming up, your losses to the Steelers, which was realistically a 10-13 loss, because the Steelers only needed a first down and they got a long over the middle touchdown when they didn't need it. And that's the most amount of points they've allowed in a game, is 20. But the loss to the Cardinals is the one that's hurt the most. Not the 10-point loss to the Chiefs that you were held scoreless for, because it's the Chiefs at this point. They've pulled a bunch of bullshit out of their ass. It's the Cardinals. You were held to 5 field goals, no touchdowns, got a couple turnovers. And that was really it. And then you let up a game-winning drive with James Conner on the realm. So now you're 5-3. Should be 6-2, but that's neither here nor there. After the Titans, which you should be 6-3. Even if you beat the Bengals, you're going to be 7-3 going into week 12 with a very interesting stretch right there. Ravens at Falcons, at Chiefs versus Bucks and Broncos. Broncos and Chargers are usually intense, close games. They usually split the series. Bucks should have Mike Evans back by that point. Baker Mayfield should still be competing at that point. I know they lost Chris Godwin, but I really like Baker Mayfield. He is a competitor, so he's not going to make that game very easy. At Falcons is going to be an interesting game. At Chiefs, could the Chargers pull the upset against the Chiefs? Could they be the one AFC West team that beats the Chiefs? I'm not picking it, but I could see it happening. But that back-to-back versus Bengals and versus Ravens in primetime, one Sunday night, one Monday night, it's going to be very interesting. If the Chargers want to be taken seriously, I think they need to be at least... They need to win between weeks 11 and 16. They should win at least 3 of those. Those 3 most likely would be the Bengals, Falcons, and I would either say the Bucks or Broncos. I think I would pick the Chargers over the Bucks before I pick the Chargers over the Broncos, because I have more belief that the Broncos could split the series before getting swept. But even in the worst case, even if you lose 4 of these games, if you're the Chargers, you still have a nice finish with Patriots and Raiders, 2 teams that aren't easy, considering at New England, and the Raiders won't make it easy for you as a divisional rival. Those should still be guaranteed to win. So if you guarantee a Patriots, Raiders, and Titans win, the Chargers have at least 8 wins on the season. And their 4 should be 9 wins. I don't think they're going to go on a 6-game losing streak from the Bengals onward. But I think their ceiling is 12-5. I could totally see them. If their defense is as legit as it's making out to be, and Herbert is finding his rhythm, he's getting everybody involved. I love what I'm seeing from Lad McConkey. And Quentin Johnston is elevating himself as that draft pick, as that high round 1 draft pick the Chargers got him at. and not the draft bust everybody was thinking he was going to be heading into the season, then the Chargers could very much well be 12-5. I want to see J.K. Dobbins utilize a little more. He blew up the first couple weeks, and ever since then he's had like some okay, solid games. But I want to see his like 130-yard performance. I want to see, 28 touches, something like that. I want to see that from the Chargers. The defense is going to carry them to at least 4 more wins. I got them finishing at 10-7, making one of the playoff spots, more likely the 6th or 7th seed. It'll be a tough one coming up, but that little finish right there with the Patriots and Raiders should be like a nice rest assured, like, okay, you could still make the playoffs even if you lose those last couple games with the Bucks and Chiefs and all them. But if the Chargers are for real and that defense is that for real, I don't see how they can lose to anybody beside maybe the Chiefs and Ravens. I think they're definitely going to lose to the Ravens and definitely going to lose to the Chiefs. Those are the two guaranteed losses I have on them. If they finish 12-5, I'll be like, okay, those are the two games they probably lost. But yeah, Chargers 10-7, making the playoffs along with the Broncos and Steelers. So that means my number 1 seed is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 8-0, should actually be like 4-4 realistically. If you took away the Ravens half-inch foot out of bounds shit, they would have went for 2-1. Bucks should have went for 2-1. Bengals, granted, the Bengals was on a controversial call on 4th down pass interference, but to me it was technically the right call, so give that. The Falcons, no pass interference on the defense over Kyle Pitts. Where's that call? And against the Bucks, even the Bucks should have went for 2. Like, I don't know why they didn't go for 2. Baker knew in the overtime. We all have the footage. He held his head up like back, like, God damn it, the Chiefs are gonna win now. The Chiefs could easily be 3-5 if teams just made better decisions or if the refs weren't involved. But that's neither here nor there. And because of that, and they're playing not even the great football. Like, last week against the Bucks was the best the offense had looked in a good while. No turnovers. DeAndre Hopkins got it going. Patrick Mahomes had 3 touchdowns, and that was really good. And so I think for the worst case scenario is the Chiefs maybe lose like 4 games. Those 4 games being against only the playoff teams, which would be either once to the Broncos because they're not getting swept, once to the Chargers, once to the Texans, Bills, or Steelers. Like 4 of those 5 games are losable. Patrick Mahomes is undefeated against the Steelers, so I'm not going to pick him to lose them against the Jets yet, unless the Steelers are looking that good. But anyways, I have them beating the Broncos. I have them losing to the Bills, beating the Panthers, beating the Raiders, beating the Chargers, beating the Browns. Texans, Steelers, Broncos, I have them winning at least 2 of those games. And like I said with the Broncos, that Week 18 matchup is going to be very interesting because my pick is either going to be very correct or very incorrect because they can finish 15-2 if they just rest their starters and let the Broncos just go into the playoffs. Or if they're both in a playoff position, then they both just rest their starters and then it's just toss up from that point. So yeah, with that being said, I've got this floor being at worst 13-4, which would still be the 2nd seed to me because they beat the Ravens in head-to-head. So they would have that overall. If the Ravens went 13-4 and the Chiefs went 13-4, the Chiefs would be the number 2 seed and the Bills would be number 1, assuming the Bills go on the winning streak. But I have their ceiling being 17-0. They're 8-0. Shit can happen. The Chiefs are just winning games regardless of how ugly it is. They haven't played their best football yet, and that's scary. They've got some ass whoopings to come by. They're going to win like 35-10 one of these games, But I think I have them losing at least 1 game. Realistically, 15-2 is probably the more likely record. But like I said, that Week 18 matchup is just a toss-up to me. I think I have them losing to the Bills right now. That's like the one team I could see beating them for how good they look. Maybe the Chargers can pull it off. Maybe the Broncos or the Steelers can pull it off, but I doubt it. So yeah, now for my AFC standings in the playoffs, these are them. Chiefs, and I used playoffpredictors.com to determine the seedings, like how the wild cards fanned out. So yeah, Chiefs number 1, Bills 2, 3 Ravens, 4 Texans, 5 Steelers, 6 Chargers, 7 Broncos. That means I got the Jets and Bengals barely missing it, Colts barely missing it, Dolphins missing it, all of them. And this playoff matchup would be very fun to watch. I think the Broncos at Bills would be very interesting. I think the Jim and John Harbaugh Bowl against the Ravens and Chargers, a rematch of the brothers of a playoff game, different teams, but the two brothers facing each other in the playoffs, that's a fun storyline for the script writers to run with, right? That's got to be something to look forward to. And then the Texans versus Steelers would be a very interesting game. I'm very curious to see who would win that. I could totally see Texans being upset right there. But yeah, those have been my AFC mid-season picks and predictions. I'm going to be doing the NFC tomorrow when I get my voice back. Jesus. Hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what y'all think, what your team is going to be finishing with, what you think I got wrong, what you think you agree with me on, and I'll see y'all next time. See ya.